The snow was falling heavily, like layers of cotton covering the sky. I stood under the eaves at the entrance of the cemetery and took out my phone. I dialed Michael's number for the second time. After a few seconds, the call was abruptly ended. I froze for a moment. Snowflakes carried by the wind swept across my face, chilling me to the bone. When Michael brought me to the cemetery, he told me there would be heavy snow today and said he'd come early to take me home. But now the snow was already falling hard, and although the mountain road twisted deep into the hills, there was still no sign of him. "Miss, if you don't go down the mountain now, it'll be too late. Once the snow seals the road, no cars will be able to come in or out," the cemetery keeper said as he stepped out, rubbing his hands, his face full of concern. I pressed my lips together and dialed his number a third time. The ringing continued, and just as it was about to end, someone answered. I felt a sudden warmth in my chest, followed instantly by a sting of grievance. But the voice that came through to my frozen ear wasn't Michael's. It was a soft, gentle woman's voice. "Hello, are you looking for Michael? He's not available to take calls right now." A buzzing filled my ears, like all the blood in my body had rushed to my head. That morning, Michael had unexpectedly changed into a white dress shirt, something he never wore, and chose an outdated tie. When he came home at noon to pick me up for the cemetery, I noticed he had cut his hair. He looked radiant, in unusually good spirits. Normally calm and indifferent, he even seemed a bit gentler today. As we left the house, he personally helped me wrap my scarf, something rare for him. 3 years into our marriage, that was one of the very few tender moments between us. I couldn't make a sound. I just stared blankly at the snow, falling thicker and heavier. The woman's gentle voice sounded again in my ear. "Hello? Are you still there? Did you dial the wrong number?" she murmured softly. "What a strange person," before hanging up. I handed the cemetery keeper some money, and he drove me down the mountain in his second-hand van. When I got back to Serenity Garden, it was already very late. That was the home Michael and I moved into after our wedding. During snowfall, it looked especially serene and beautiful. After a hot bath, I stood outside Michael's study for a while before finally pushing the door open and going in. The day after we got married, he had coldly warned me, "Don't go into my study without permission. If you must, don't touch anything inside." I had liked him since we were young, so of course I obeyed every word he said. But now, standing before his desk, I picked up a book that was lying face down. Inside, I found a small, old photograph tucked between the pages. The girl in the photo had a young, innocent face. She smiled softly at the camera, her expression both tender and shy. On the back of the photo were a few lines of handwriting. "To Michael, from Claire." Below that, written in Michael's own hand, "I miss her. I think of her. I will never forget." As tears rolled down my face, I suddenly laughed. I always thought we chose Serenity Garden because of its quiet beauty, but now I finally understood. Maybe it was because her name was Claire, and serenity came from her. I put the photo down, wiped away my tears, and couldn't help but laugh at how blind I had been. The signs had always been there. Lately, Michael had been flying to France frequently. I thought it was for business, and didn't give it a second thought. Over the past month, he had even lost interest in having children, something he used to be passionate about. And just the night before, when I swallowed my pride and tried to be intimate, he pushed me away. But after we got married, he used to want me nearly every night. In bed, his passion always made me forget how cold and silent he was during the day. Only now did I realize it had always been a one-woman performance. Mine alone. But if someone else had already filled his heart, then why, 3 years ago, did he cling to me so desperately after drinking? On the night of my 21st birthday, Michael burst into my room, drunk and unsteady. "Emily," he said, "I want you." He tore open my thin nightgown, his dark eyes filled with a wild, consuming desire. "Then take me," I said. "I'll give myself to you." He leaned down and kissed me, hot and lingering. And when he entered me, even that was rough. We barely had any real connection. I was terrified and in pain at the time, yet somewhere deep inside a flicker of joy quietly blossomed. Years of secret longing suddenly felt like they had finally come to fruition. In the most passionate moment, he held on to me and wouldn't let go. "Don't push me away. Don't reject me again, okay? Tell me you love me. Tell me you'll never leave me. Fighting through shyness and pain, I told him over and over that I loved him. The happiness swelling inside me grew wild, so intense that I wished I could rip my heart out and give it to him. How could I have known that the Michael from that night hadn't lost control because of alcohol or overwhelming emotions? He didn't love me. He had never loved me. I turned and walked out of the small building. Looking at the quiet Serenity Garden buried in snow, I knew I couldn't stay here another minute. At dawn, while snow still blanketed the ground, Michael had his driver take him back to Serenity Garden. He had been in a great mood the night before, drank too much, and with the snowstorm, ended up staying at a hotel. But his body clock never changed, so even hungover, he woke up before daylight. After a brief haze, he suddenly remembered that yesterday had been his mother-in-law's memorial. He had promised Emily he would pick her up early. A pang of guilt stirred in his chest. Emily lost her parents in an accident when she was a child. The Song family adopted her, and she and Michael had grown up together. He had always treated her like a younger sister. Until the year she turned 21, when she drugged his drink, then showed up clinging to him in a thin nightgown, holding him tightly while the drug overwhelmed his senses. That night, in a haze of lust and confusion, he mistook her for Claire. To this day, he still remembered how Emily cried beneath him that night, sobbing hard, and yet whispering again and again, "Michael, I love you. I'll never leave you. Never ever." Of course, she could say that. The elders in the Song family adored her. The next day when they found out what had happened, they immediately forced him to marry her. Michael let out a cold, silent laugh. He had fulfilled her wish. But what about Claire? His marriage had shattered Claire's heart. She had left the country with finality, cutting off all contact for years. He exhaled heavily and rubbed his temples. The car rolled through the gates of Serenity Garden. The entire place was still and silent. The main house was dark. Michael figured Emily was still asleep. She loved to sleep in and never got up early in winter. So instead of heading to the master bedroom, he went straight to his study. The door was still ajar, unlocked. The day after their wedding, he had told Emily never to enter his study, and she had listened obediently. For the past 3 years, she had never once stepped inside. But now, as he pushed the door open, everything in the room looked exactly as it always had. The book he had been flipping through recently, Remembrance of Things Past, was still lying face down on the desk. But now beside it, there was a photo and a piece of white paper. Michael's heart suddenly tightened. He took several steps forward and immediately saw Claire's face in the photograph. Reaching out, he picked it up and found the white sheet of paper underneath. The handwriting was clean and elegant, sharp in its restraint. Just one short line, but he recognized it instantly as Emily's. Michael's song, "I'm giving you what you wanted." He didn't know how long he stood there in front of the desk. When he came back to himself, the paper was crumpled tightly in his hand. His eyes fell on the gold pen lying nearby, the wedding gift Emily had given him. And now she had used that gift to leave him this message. Michael lowered his head and let out a short, bitter laugh. Then he turned and walked out quickly. He made his way to the master bedroom and pushed the door open, only to find it completely empty. He stood there for a full 30 seconds. His initial guilt from forgetting to pick her up yesterday had now completely vanished. Michael's face turned cold as he walked to the trash bin and threw the crumpled paper inside with force. As he turned to head downstairs, Michael's phone suddenly rang. His heart skipped a beat as he quickly picked it up. But the name flashing on the screen was Claire's. Michael brushed aside the faint trace of disappointment that surfaced in his chest and answered the call. "Michael, let's go to the hot springs resort in a few days, shall we? Bring your wife along. You could introduce us too," Claire said with a lightness in her voice. "I'm really curious to know what she's like." A flicker of irritation flared up in Michael's chest for no apparent reason. "If I don't bring her, she acts up and pisses everyone off. But if I do bring her, she ruins the mood. She's still young after all. 24 is still considered young. You at that age were far more mature than she is now." Claire chuckled softly. "What's gotten into you? Why so worked up this early in the morning?" "Nothing. Just annoyed," he muttered. "Then how about I keep you company?" Her voice was as soft and warm as ever, unchanged over the years. Just hearing her made that unknown frustration in his chest gradually fade. His tones softened as well. "Let's have lunch together. I'll come pick you up." "Okay, I'll wait for you." In the days after I left Serenity Garden, Michael never once called me. But that was typical of him. Always distant, cold, never one to reach out first. Over the past few days, I'd met with several lawyers to discuss divorce. Everything for the agreement was nearly ready. I was planning to return to the Song family's old estate when I suddenly received a call from an unfamiliar number. A woman's intuition made me instantly think of Claire. I hesitated for a few seconds before answering. "Hello? Who's this?" There was a long silence on the other end. Just as I was about to hang up, a voice finally spoke. "Serenity Garden is beautiful, isn't it?" That voice. It was exactly the same as that night, same tone, soft like the spring rain in Jungnan, gentle as cotton, yet it made it harder and harder for me to breathe. "If you've got something to say, just say it," I replied, digging my nails into my palm, letting the dull pain consume me. "Emily, putting broken pieces back together is difficult, but I believe we can do it. Do you know why?" Her voice was calm, deliberate, because the things we can't have always haunt us. But what we have and then lose, that's what carves itself deepest into our bones. "Serenity Garden is the best example of that, don't you think?" Claire said gently. "It's right there. It will never disappear. Every time he leaves, every time he returns home and sees those words Serenity Garden, he remembers me. So that's what I miss her. I think of her. I will never forget," really meant. Michael gradually began to feel something was wrong. I still hadn't returned to Serenity Garden, and there hadn't been any word from the old Song estate either. In the past 3 years, I would occasionally get upset and leave for a few days, and during those times, I'd stay at the old house. Whenever that happened, either his grandfather or Mrs. Song would call and ask him to bring me back. He used to find that little routine of mine mildly annoying. But now, oddly enough, the silence felt unsettling. Michael hesitated, then decided to call Mrs. Song. Standing under the corridor eaves, he made some idle small talk before cutting to the chase. "Did Emily go back to the old house? Has she been crying in front of you and Grandpa again?" There was a brief pause before Mrs. Song replied. "Yes, she came back." A cloud of unease lifted slightly from Michael's chest. He toyed with the small bird in its cage, the corners of his lips curving faintly. "Has she been giving you and Grandpa a hard time again? I'll come pick her up. Better to take her home than have her stir up trouble at the old place." "Michael," Mrs. Song suddenly interrupted, her voice strained, "Emily's already left. She gave me her things and then walked out. I tried everything to stop her, but she wouldn't stay." Her voice trembled, then cracked. "What exactly did you do to hurt her like this?" Michael's hand froze mid-motion. The pampered canary in his palm gave a frightened cry. He slowly came back to his senses, though his expression remained calm. "She gave you something?" he asked flatly. "If she wants to leave, let her. Where could she possibly go anyway?" Yes, he thought, the world is vast, but where could she really go? But the Song family was the only home I had. He didn't believe I would leave. He believed I loved him too much that I couldn't bear to walk away. I think I heard Mrs. Song sob quietly. "It's the divorce papers. Emily said she wants to divorce you? She wants to leave the capital and never come back." For a moment, Michael felt like the air had been sucked out around him. In the distance, the skies over Tianmu were dark and heavy again, as if snow were about to fall. On the other end of the line, Mrs. Song kept talking, but he didn't hear a word. Not until she called his name several times did he slowly snap back to reality. "What else did she say?" he asked. "Nothing," she replied. "She just asked me to find a time to give you the divorce papers." A cold wind suddenly picked up, lashing his face with snow that stung like tiny knives. Michael raised a hand to brush it away, his voice still calm. "I'll come get them now?" He had the driver prepare the car to return to the Song family estate. As the vehicle pulled out of Serenity Garden, he looked out the window. Thick clouds blanketed the sky. A heavy snowstorm was coming. Then it hit him. On that night, snow had fallen without stopping. Yet no cars had left Serenity Garden. So how had Emily managed to leave? Mrs. Song had returned my call, but the voice I heard on the other end wasn't hers. It was Michael's. I've read the divorce agreement. I have issues with a few clauses. I stood at the hotel's floor-to-ceiling window, looking out at the glowing city lights and the snow-covered world. A slow, dull ache rose from the depths of my chest before I finally found my voice. Okay, I'll have my lawyer contact you. Emily, I don't have time to argue with your lawyer. Then what do you want? I asked. Let's talk in person. If we come to an agreement, I'll sign right away. Fine. Where are you now? I'll send a driver to pick you up. No need. Just tell me where to meet, I'll come. Because of the snow, I was about 20 minutes late. Michael hated it when people weren't punctual. When I entered the room, he was checking his watch, his expression already dark. When he saw me, his face grew even colder, as though even the gold-rimmed glasses on his sharp nose gave off a chill. I lowered my head and gave a slight laugh. When someone doesn't love you, even the tiniest fault becomes unbearable. Sorry, there was traffic. Whatever the reason, it has nothing to do with me. Standing in front of him, I took a deep breath. I'm sorry for wasting your valuable time. His hand paused slightly as he held the divorce agreement. Then he gestured toward the seat across from him. Let's talk. I sat down. Which clauses are you objecting to? Before the wedding, Grandpa said if we divorced within 10 years, regardless of who was at fault, I wouldn't get his shares. Michael gave a faint laugh. You knew that, Emily. And now you're bringing up divorce just to threaten me. I slowly lifted my gaze and looked at him steadily. The man in front of me had been my husband for 3 years. The man I had secretly loved since I was young. Yet he was also the one I had never truly understood. The one I had never reached, not even once. In his heart. He pushed the divorce agreement toward me and stood up. His tone left no room for argument. Pack your things. You're coming back to Serenity Garden with me tonight. I can pretend none of this ever happened. Michael, I interrupted him, I'll speak to Grandpa myself. I'll explain everything. It won't affect your inheritance. Emily, you know as well as I do how much he dotes on you. They forced you onto me back then. What makes you think they'll give you up so easily now? Michael tugged at his tie, his brows furrowed and face dark, his voice cold and unfeeling. It felt like someone had suddenly torn open a wound in my chest, leaving it raw and bleeding. After 3 years, he had finally spoken the truth that had been buried in his heart all this time. It must have been hard for someone like him, a man so proud and admired, to endure such humiliation. I wanted to laugh, but my eyes burned too fiercely with pain. I didn't want to cry. I really didn't. But the tears came anyway, out of my control. I'm sorry, I said. Michael, I drafted that divorce agreement with trembling hands. My whole body was shaking. I'm sorry I took up 3 years of your life. I'm sorry I occupied the place of your wife. I took a shaky breath. In any case, I'll do everything I can to make Grandpa take back that decision. I won't let this put you in a difficult position. I turned and began to walk out. I had only taken a few steps when his voice came from behind me, sharp and layered. You feel so wronged now, but didn't you think about that when you schemed against me back then? I stopped and slowly turned to face Michael. Schemed against you? He let out a faint, bitter laugh and silently looked away. Emily, I'm giving you one chance. Come back to Serenity Garden with me tonight and we'll write off everything that's happened. I'll never go back. Michael stared at me for 3 full seconds. When he finally spoke, his voice was coated in ice. Suit yourself. He sat holding his tea, staring blankly out the window. It wasn't until Claire called his name twice that he snapped back to reality. What are you daydreaming about? The tea's gone cold, she said, smiling as she gently took the cup from his hand and replaced it with a fresh hot one. Michael lowered his head and took a small sip. The tea was excellent, but it tasted like nothing to him. Claire sat beside him, holding her own cup. Your wife still won't come home? Michael's face darkened immediately. Don't mention her. Claire had a pair of calm, deep eyes. When she looked at someone, it was as if her gaze could quiet even their heart. Michael, I've been thinking about this for a while. I've decided to return to France. Why? He asked, caught off guard. Why go back all of a sudden? She smiled gently. Because I'm not happy. And when I'm not happy, I want the people I care about to be. You and your wife have been married for 3 years and seemed deeply in love, but ever since I came back, everything's turned into a mess. That's got nothing to do with you, Michael said. It's her. She's immature and reckless, spoiled by all the elders in the family. She thinks she can do whatever she wants. He recalled how Grandpa had scolded him over the phone furiously. The thought made his irritation bubble again. He hadn't expected Emily to actually go to Grandpa. She really seemed determined to go against him this time. Michael had never seriously considered divorcing her. If she wanted to throw a tantrum, he'd let her. She always got over it in a few days. But now everything was unfolding so far beyond what he'd anticipated. That's great, Claire suddenly said with a small, almost wistful smile. But then a single tear slid slowly down her cheek. Claire, why are you crying? He asked. I guess I'm just envious of your wife, she said, looking up with tears in her eyes and a faint smile on her lips. She looked heartbreakingly fragile. Michael remembered her past and couldn't help but feel a tug of sympathy. Though her parents died early, she'd always had his family to love and protect her. Claire rarely showed this kind of vulnerability. Not like me, she continued, her voice cracking. I never had anyone to lean on. No elders to guide me when I was lost. No one to show me the way when I had nowhere else to go. She took a breath. Michael, I once told you I'd never regret it. But now, I think I do. If I hadn't gotten rid of that child back then, would there still have been a chance for us? Michael suddenly set down his teacup and stood. That's all in the past. There's no such thing as what if. You still hate me, don't you? You hate that I aborted our baby, that I walked away and disappeared. Michael shook his head. I've never hated you. It was me who let you down. Whatever you did, I deserved it. Tears fell from Claire's eyes like rain. She stood and threw herself into Michael's arms. No, I know you've been hating me all this time, she sobbed. I was stupid. I couldn't stand seeing Emily parade your marriage around like a trophy. I lost control. Michael's lips pressed into a tight line, his face pale with stormy silence. Claire's crying was like a thin thread, winding tightly around his heart, cutting deeper with every pass. Michael, she whispered, after the child was gone, I regretted it right away. But by then, it was already too late. You have no idea. Over the years, I kept having the same dream. I dreamt of him as a little boy. He looked just like you. In the dream, he would question me, asking why I didn't want him. Claire's crying grew louder. Michael, do you think he'll never forgive me for being his mother? Michael slowly lowered his head and gently cupped her face in his hands, brushing away the tears from her cheeks with deep tenderness in his eyes. He wiped them away one by one until finally he tasted the bitterness of her tears on his lips. He will, he said softly. He'll forgive you. He'll know you didn't mean to give him up. Then, do you think he'll come back? Do you think he'd still be willing to come back? He will, Michael replied. He'll come back. Claire rose up on her toes, arms clinging to his neck, kissing him with desperate longing. All these years we've been apart, she whispered. I've never been with anyone else. Can't we bring him back, please? She loosened one hand and began to slip her blouse off her shoulder. As the pale, exposed skin came into view, all Michael could think of was Emily, that chaotic, alcohol-fueled night when he lost control. Her young, tender body had revealed itself slowly to him under the dim lights, unguarded and vulnerable. He didn't understand why, in this moment of Claire's pain and love, his mind would wander to his wife. But when Claire guided his hand to her chest, he flinched like he'd been shocked and abruptly pushed her away. His phone was vibrating relentlessly on the table, his sudden savior. Sorry, he muttered, grabbing for it. I need to take this. Claire bit her lip, her heart flooding with disappointment and an inexplicable sense of dread. But then she thought of the look Michael had given her just moments ago, the pity in his eyes, and steeled herself again with hope. Love might not last. Love might not be dependable. But guilt and emotional attachment, those were reliable. She would make sure Michael carried that guilt for the rest of his life. She would make sure he always felt responsible for her, always cared for her, just like Serenity Garden, forever rooted, never fading or disappearing. But what Michael said next shattered her world all over again. What did you just say? Emily just fainted. The doctor said, she's pregnant. Michael spoke into the phone as he grabbed his coat and headed straight for the door. Claire stood there in stunned silence. By the time she came to her senses, Michael had already opened the door. "Michael," she cried, chasing after him, grabbing the sleeve of his coat, refusing to let go. He turned back to look at her tear-filled eyes, and suddenly, they overlapped in his mind with the way Emily had looked at him, crying. Just the same. What was he doing? Claire was part of the past. His wife was Emily. He had never truly wanted a divorce. So why was he tangled up in this again? Whatever feelings he had once shared with Claire, they were long gone. If that night had never happened with Emily. If Claire hadn't aborted their child back then, maybe things would have turned out differently. But now, there was no space left for what if. He pushed Claire's hand away. "Sorry, Claire. I have to go back now. You heard the call. My wife, she's pregnant." "What about me?" Claire cried, her voice breaking. "What about me, Michael?" Tears streamed down her face. "You've fallen for her, haven't you? But you told me. You told me you'd love me for the rest of your life. You built Serenity Garden for me." Michael's expression darkened slightly. "I admit I loved you very much back then. And yes, the name Serenity Garden came from you. But that was the past. I'm married now. I never planned on divorcing her, especially now that she's carrying my child." He reached out and gently wiped the tears from her face. "I don't want to make another mistake." "Michael?" Claire tried to grab his hand again, but he turned without hesitation and walked away. Striding out of the room, he said he didn't want to make another mistake. But what about her? What about their child who never had a chance? Claire watched as his figure disappeared, not even glancing back. Her legs gave out beneath her and she collapsed to the floor, like a ghost slipping free from her body. Did he really make a mistake back then? If he had been able to endure the humiliation and pressure from the Song family, if he had just swallowed his pride a little more, would it all have turned out differently? Would he not be standing here again, abandoned once more, by Michael? Claire covered her face with her hands as big, heavy tears spilled through her fingers. But even as she cried, not a single sound came from her. When I woke up from my deep sleep, the first thing I saw was Michael sitting quietly at my bedside. He looked exhausted, but in his eyes there was something else. Joy, unspoken and glowing. What happened to me?" I asked weakly, blinking as I looked around. It seemed I was in the Song family's old house, in one of the guest rooms. But why was I here? Hadn't Grandpa agreed to cancel that decision? He'd promised me I could divorce Michael. So why was I still in the Song house, and why was Michael looking at me like that? "Do you want some water? Are you hungry? I can have the kitchen make you something," he said gently, placing his hand on my forehead. It was cool and steady. Good. No fever. How did I end up here? What happened to me? "Emily." Michael suddenly took my hand in his. I tried to pull away, but he held on tightly, so tightly. "You're pregnant. We're going to have a baby." "What did you say?" I stared at him in shock, my eyes slowly widening in disbelief. "We're going to have a baby. Emily, you're going to be a mother." Michael leaned down and kissed my forehead lightly. "You can't be throwing tantrums like a child anymore. The baby might laugh at you." 3 years of marriage. Even in our most intimate moments, his affection had only amounted to the occasional kiss or a few flirtatious words. He had never looked at me with such tenderness. He had never spoken to me so gently. And yet now, just because of the small life growing inside me. "No," I whispered, gently pushing his hand away. "It won't." "What won't?" "It won't laugh at me," I said quietly, my gaze lifting to meet his, calm and resolute. "Because I'm not going to have this child." Michael exploded in anger. He had never been the kind of man to show emotion. Even after we were married, though he didn't love me, he had never lost his temper with me. But when I repeated those words, that I didn't want the baby, he completely lost control. He smashed the cup in front of him. The noise brought the elders rushing in. Grandpa pulled Michael out of the room, and Mrs. Song stayed with me, her face torn between joy and sorrow. When I saw the traces of tears on her face, something in my heart twisted with pain. I was only 5 when I came to the Song family. Mrs. Song saw that I was orphaned and took me in, raising me as her own. Her kindness and affection over all those years, I could never forget that. "I'm sorry, Mom," I sobbed into her arms. "Silly girl, what are you apologizing for?" she said, holding me tightly. "Was it Michael's outburst that scared you? I'll scold him later. No, I'll give him a real beating." "Mom." I sat up slowly from her embrace. At that moment, I didn't dare look into her eyes. But how could I accept that the man I loved deeply had always had another woman in his heart, even in our most intimate moments? And how could I accept that our marital home was named after her? "I'm truly sorry," I said, biting my lip to stop the tears from spilling. "I don't want this baby. I know I've let you and Grandpa down." Mrs. Song sat silently for a long time. Then suddenly, her eyes filled with tears. "Emily, can't you give Michael just one more chance?" Her hands trembled badly as she held on to mine, refusing to let go. "Emily, I'm begging you, please, for me. All these years, I've treated you like my own daughter. I've never asked you for anything. Just this once, let me beg you, okay?" I watched as her tears rolled down in streams, one after another. Hearing her beg me like that, me, the girl who owed the Song family more than she could ever repay, I couldn't bring myself to reject her again. Maybe it was also because I was an orphan, and in this world the only family I had was the tiny life growing inside me. This child shared my blood. In the end, my heart softened. I sat there in silence, tears flowing freely. "Mom, let me think about it some more." Mrs. Song's eyes widened with hope. "Okay, sweetheart. I won't pressure you, just rest and think quietly by yourself." She left the room. Not long after, I heard vague sounds outside. A few moments later, a maid brought in some soup and said carefully, "Young madam, the master just got very angry. He made Mr. Michael kneel in the snow outside. He said, you'll decide when he can get up, whenever you forgive him." I threw off the covers and walked to the window. The sky outside was dark and gray, and snow had started falling again. The stone paths in the courtyard were covered in a thick white layer. Michael was kneeling there, his back perfectly straight. I bit my lip instinctively. A quiet, aching pain bloomed in my chest, stinging my nose until I nearly choked on the sensation. I stood there watching for a while, then closed the curtains and quietly returned to bed. When the sky turned completely dark, a maid informed me that Michael was still outside in the snow, his clothes soaked through. I went to see Grandpa. "You don't need to speak for him," Grandpa said sternly. "Unless you truly want to forgive him, I'd rather have a great-grandchild than watch that fool cause more trouble." He let out a long, heavy sigh. He and his father, they're both fools. I didn't fully understand what he meant, and was just about to ask when a servant rushed in, saying Michael had just collapsed but forced himself back to his knees. The snow outside had grown thick and heavy. In weather like this, if he stayed down much longer, he could lose both legs. There was no deep hatred between Michael and me. In fact, the Song family had shown me nothing but immense kindness. It didn't need to come to this. "Grandpa, please let him get up," I said calmly. "I'll keep the child, but I'm not going to change my mind about the divorce." "Emily, are you really willing to keep this child?" he asked, visibly shaken. I gripped the edge of the sheet tightly and nodded. That night, Michael came down with a high fever. He had always been strong, rarely ever sick, but this time the fever lingered for 4 or 5 days. It wasn't until the snow began to ease that he slowly recovered. Only then did Grandpa allow him to see me. I insisted on moving out of the old Song estate and went back to the hotel where I'd stayed before. I would live there until the old house from my own family, the Joe residence, was cleaned and ready. The day we saw each other again, the weather was uncharacteristically sunny. He had lost weight, his cheeks slightly sunken, his frame leaner. When he saw me, he hesitated for a long while before finally walking over and crouching in front of me. "Emily," he said, reaching out to hold my hand. But I pulled it back. He didn't press. He just looked at me gently and asked, "I heard you're having the Joe house cleaned. Are you planning to move back there?" "Yes. If you don't want to return to Serenity Garden, the Song family has other houses." "I want to live in my own home," I said, lowering my gaze. My hand drifted to rest softly on my still flat stomach. Maybe it was just a natural instinct. Once a woman knows there's a new life growing inside her, that child becomes all she can think about. "If that's what you want, it's fine to stay at your own place for now," Michael said. "I've also had people start redoing the interior of Serenity Garden." "I don't want to hear that name," I interrupted. The words pierced me like a sharp thorn. That name had always been embedded deep in my heart, and just thinking about it hurt. I turned my face toward the window. "I want to sleep for a bit. Please leave." Okay. Michael hesitated for a second but still reached out and gently brushed my hair. I tried to move away, but he had already withdrawn his hand. Oh, right, your prenatal checkup is tomorrow. I'll come pick you up then. I didn't answer. Michael didn't say anything else. He stood up and left. But the next day, he never came to pick me up. Even as the time for my prenatal appointment drew closer, there was still no sign of him. I finally gathered my documents, deciding to go on my own. But just as I was about to leave the room, my phone rang. It was Michael. Emily, something urgent came up. Stay in your room and don't go downstairs, okay? Promise me. His voice sounded rushed, almost panicked. I could hear the background noise, loud, chaotic, full of voices and clamor. My heart slowly began to tighten. Did something happen? I asked. No, just a friend having a bit of trouble. Don't worry, I'll be there soon. Just wait in your room, all right? Be good. Michael, I started to ask more, but he had already hung up. Still, right before the call ended, I thought I heard a woman's voice, choked with tears, calling his name. I stood there quietly, clutching my phone. For some reason, my mind drifted back to that day in the cemetery. Deep down, I knew Michael wasn't coming back today. But strangely, it didn't hurt anymore. I wasn't disappointed either. Because ever since that day, I'd stopped expecting anything from him. I didn't wait in the room. I grabbed my bag and left. When I took the elevator down to the first floor, the lobby was packed with reporters and media. It was as loud and chaotic as a marketplace. Flashbulbs from dozens of cameras flickered non-stop at the center of the crowd, on a man and woman. Even from behind, I recognized Michael instantly. His coat was draped over the woman's shoulders. He was shielding her, wrapping her protectively in his arms. He even carefully covered her head and face for her. The woman had buried her entire face into his chest. The camera lenses caught only Michael's face, cold, sharp, and unrelenting. Mr. Song, are you and your wife separated? Is it because of Miss Claire? Did your wife intentionally leak to the media that this hotel is owned in part by Miss Claire, as revenge for her affair with you? What do you think of your wife's retaliation? Did Miss Claire really come between you and your wife? There are rumors that Miss Claire once had your child. Is it true that your marital home, Serenity Garden, was named after her? Suddenly, Michael grabbed one of the cameras that was practically shoved in his face and slammed it hard onto the floor. The barrage of questions fell into sudden silence. Michael stared coldly at the crowd and spoke firmly. First, my relationship with my wife is a private matter between us. I have no comment. Second, Miss Claire did not come between my wife and me. She is not the other woman. Third, our home, Serenity Garden, has nothing to do with anyone else. But Mr. Song, one female reporter quickly interjected, Claire's name literally contains the word serenity. Michael turned his gaze sharply toward her. There are millions of women with serenity in their names. Does that mean they're all connected to me? As a married man, aren't you concerned about protecting another woman so openly? Aren't you afraid your wife will be hurt when she sees this? If you people hadn't surrounded my friend and cornered her in a bathroom, terrifying her so much she couldn't even come out, I wouldn't have had to step in like this. He snapped. Then, Mr. Song, can we conclude you have no intention of divorcing your wife? That you and Miss Claire are merely friends? That your relationship with your wife... Michael didn't answer. His bodyguards finally arrived, forcing the crowd aside and escorting him and Claire out of the hotel lobby. The reporters were just about to chase after them when someone suddenly shouted, "That's Mrs. Song." "It's her. Mrs. Song is over there." The mob turned toward me like a crashing wave. I instinctively shielded my stomach and tried to back away, but someone suddenly shoved me. Off balance and caught off guard, I fell hard to the floor. "She's bleeding. Call an ambulance now." Panic, shouting, camera shutters clicking non-stop. The flashes were blinding. My world faded from glaring white to endless black. Curled up on the ground, I slowly closed my eyes. Outside the hospital room, Mrs. Song slapped Michael hard across the face. He didn't move. He didn't even try to dodge it. He didn't even flinch. Not even a crease in his brow, even though his cheek clearly bore the marks of her slap. Mrs. Song looked utterly drained. She sank onto the bench outside the room, her expression vacant. "It's my fault. I ruined Emily. I destroyed her happiness. If I had known you'd turn out to be lower than a dog," she said hoarsely, I'd rather never have had a son like you. I'd rather you and Claire had both disappeared together. I never would have tried so hard to match you with Emily." "This is my punishment," she said, suddenly laughing, but as she laughed, tears streamed down her face. "But your punishment is even worse. You fell in love with the daughter of your father's mistress. You were going to marry her. You got her pregnant. And where does that leave me, your mother? How could I possibly sit by and watch that woman's daughter walk into my home like she belonged there? The night you slept with Emily, you claimed I drugged your drink, that I pushed you into marrying her. I thought I was doing the right thing, breaking you and Claire apart and giving that poor girl Emily some happiness. But I was wrong. I didn't help her. I destroyed her. You were never good enough for her. You want to know what your punishment is?" she choked. "You lost your child, all for that wretched woman. That's your punishment for loving her." Michael stared at her, stunned, disbelieving. "What did you just say?" he asked. "You put something in my drink." "Yes," she said quietly. "It was me. Why didn't you tell me? And how was I supposed to say it? My son wanted to be with the daughter of the woman who ruined my marriage, so I gave him something to make him forget, for one night. But I didn't dare hurt you, so I only gave you the lightest possible dose. Ask yourself, Michael, was it really the drug? Was it enough to make you lose control? Or had you already lost control long before that? You're the only one who knows the answer. For 3 years, Emily gave everything to you. And you, how did you treat her? Even a stone would have been warmed by now. But you, for the sake of a bastard child from that filthy woman, you left your wife alone at a cemetery. Do you even understand how deeply you hurt her? Do you even know how she walked out of Serenity Garden that night, step by step, in the freezing wind and snow? Serenity Garden, she scoffed. How ridiculous. You humiliated your wife to prove your great love for another woman. But no matter how noble your love may seem, trash bloodlines will always be trash. That child will never be accepted into this family. Not in this lifetime. Michael stood frozen in place, his hands clenched so tightly at his sides they'd turned white. His entire body trembled uncontrollably. Memories surged through his mind like a reel of flashing film. The question clawed at him. Had it really been the drug? Or had he already wanted her, already crossed a line in his heart? He had never dared face his guilt over Claire's miscarriage. He had been too ashamed to admit that he'd long harbored feelings for the girl he called his little sister. So he lied to himself. He dumped all the blame on Emily. He had selfishly enjoyed the privileges of being her husband, while denying her any of the warmth that should have come with it. Suddenly, Michael turned and walked to the hospital room. He pushed open the door. There stood Emily, dressed in a hospital gown, pale and worn, her cheeks streaked with dried tears. "Emily," Michael said, standing there, frozen. He didn't dare take a step closer. He didn't even lift his hand to wipe her tears away. After a long, unbearable silence, Emily finally spoke. Just one sentence. "Michael, let's divorce. I never want to see you again." I left the capital just before the new year. Once I had recovered, snow covered the city. Mrs. Song came to see me off. I knew Michael was also in the car, but I didn't want to see him. She didn't press me. I never held anything against Mrs. Song for what happened years ago. But now that the truth was out, I couldn't help but wonder, if none of that had ever happened, how would things be now? Maybe I would have married someone I didn't love and spent my life in quiet mediocrity. Or maybe I would have married no one at all, just lived my life as Emily, true to myself. I loved him once. I married him for 3 years. In the end, all I got in return was pain. But the good news is, my body is slowly healing. And I'm still young. The future holds endless possibilities. If you ever get the chance, you must come back to visit, Mrs. Song said. Your grandfather and I both think of you often. She helped me wrap my scarf. She had aged a lot, her once dignified face now weary and haggard. Losing the child had hit her the hardest. And because of it, she had finally given up on Michael. "Okay," I said gently, brushing back the gray strands at her temple. "You and Grandpa, please take good care of yourselves." She nodded. Her reddened eyes welled up again. I reached out and wiped away her tears, softly comforting her. "Don't be sad, Mom. Do you hate me?" "No," I said. "I only remember how much love you've shown me all these years." Mrs. Song covered her mouth and began to sob. Emily, there's no more Serenity Garden. Michael had it torn down. I looked at her, startled. The hotel incident. It was Claire. She tipped off the media. Orchestrated the whole thing. And your miscarriage, it wasn't an accident. She arranged for someone to push you. For a moment my mind went blank. I had always thought it was just a horrible accident. I never imagined it had been intentional. But whatever the truth, I told myself, this is how the world works. Debts must be repaid. Those who kill must be judged. Whatever Claire had done, I believed the law would handle her punishment. Mrs. Song gritted her teeth. She still has the nerve to send people begging you for forgiveness. I won't forgive her, I said calmly. No matter what, I won't. Michael said the same. He swore he wouldn't forgive her either. He's determined to see Claire go to prison. I let out a long, steady breath. Good. No matter how much he had loved her, in the end, blood ties mattered more than anything else. If I hadn't lost the baby, would Michael still hate her this much? But none of that mattered anymore. I didn't want to think about any of it. I gave Mrs. Song one final hug and turned to get in the car. Emily, you have to come back and visit your mom, okay? She called out. I sat in the car, unable to help myself. I lowered the window and looked back. In the cold wind, Mrs. Song kept waving at me. Not far behind her, under a leafless tree, Michael stood wearing a black overcoat, tall and straight. He was still handsome, still young, but he would never again make my heart ache with just a glance. All those feelings I once thought were too heavy to bear. They had drifted away so lightly. Just before he disappeared from view, I turned away and rolled up the window. The drive to the airport was long. Somewhere along the way, I dozed off. In my dream, I returned to my childhood. I was 5 years old, just brought into the Song family. Later, as I grew closer to Michael, he would sometimes hold me on his lap while practicing calligraphy, guiding my little hand as he taught me to write my own name. As I got a bit older, the practice sheets I copied were all written by him. My handwriting became nearly identical to his. But across all those years, every word he wrote was filled with longing for Claire. And all I ever chased was a distant, cold shadow that had never truly existed. At 35, many of Michael's friends and cousins had long since married, started families, lived content lives. But he remained alone. The torn-down Serenity Garden was never rebuilt. It gradually became overgrown, abandoned. Mrs. Song's health declined and she moved south to recover. She rarely agreed to see him anymore. And before the new year, Grandpa couldn't survive one last winter illness. He passed away quietly. In his final moments, he was still calling my name, Emily. He held on, just long enough to see him. Michael had taken a red-eye flight, rushing back in the middle of the night, just to accompany Grandpa through the very last stretch of his life. At the funeral, Michael's tears didn't stop for a second. He supported Mrs. Song the entire time. Both of them cried like they had no more strength left. After the funeral ended, it was time for him to leave. It was only on that day, his last day, that we spoke to each other. But the moment I opened my mouth, I called him Brother Michael, just like I did before he turned 14. When Serenity Garden was demolished, I had sorted through the study and found an old diary. Starting from when I was 14, every page was filled with the private thoughts of a young girl. Line by line, stroke by stroke, it was all love, silent and overflowing. He used to tease me then, asking why I'd suddenly stopped calling him brother. Now, he finally understood. Just like how he never once called Claire sister, even though she was older by 6 months. There were many old belongings in the study he hadn't taken with him, but this yellowing diary, and the notes I had left behind, he'd taken them without knowing why. All these years, he rarely dreamed of me. And on the rare occasions he did, he could never make out my face. But now I stood before him, alive and real. He could see every detail, the dark, inky brows, the long lashes that cast a soft shadow beneath the sunlight, and the tiny brown mole resting at the corner of my eye. He raised a hand, wanting to ruffle my hair, wanting to laugh and joke. What, calling me brother again all of a sudden? But in the end, he didn't do anything. He only said softly, "Come back when you have time. Mom misses you a lot." "I will," I said, and then there was silence again, until his ride pulled up. He quietly picked up my suitcase. "Let me walk you out." I didn't want him to, not really. But he didn't wait for an answer. He just started walking, pulling the suitcase along. Every corner of the Song estate was familiar to us both. We walked the winding path, through the garden, across the lawn, past the old tree. I almost heard echoes of my childhood laughter. I'd always been playful, spirited, more mischievous than he was. I could even climb trees better. Once, I climbed all the way to the top of the big tree in the yard. Everyone in the house panicked, even Grandpa, who came hurrying over with his cane, his hands shaking as he ordered them to get a ladder. But before they could reach me, I had already scrambled down on my own. Between the thick branches, I shouted again and again, "Michael, catch me, I'm going to jump." He frowned and scolded me. "Stop messing around, you'll get hurt." But I didn't care. I just giggled, daring as ever, and jumped. His heart practically leapt into his throat, but he still managed to catch me. Mrs. Song clutched her chest in fright, pretending to be angry, threatening to spank me. I ran in circles, hiding behind Michael, using him as my shield. He couldn't help laughing. He covered for me, pleaded for me. "How could you really bear to hit her, Mom?" Everyone in the family adored me, spoiled me, and he was no exception. When did everything start to change? When did we grow so far apart we couldn't go back anymore? He didn't know. Was it because people change too easily, or because when we're young, we take everything within reach for granted? The front gate of the old estate came into view. A foolish, impossible thought surfaced in his mind. What if they could just keep walking and never reach it? What if they could go back to how things once were? If he had the chance, he would have faced his feelings head-on. He would have told me, clearly and honestly, that when he broke up with Claire, his love for her had already started to fade. Everything after that was guilt. Guilt for the baby she lost and lingering emotional debt. He didn't dislike me. He didn't not want to marry me. During the 3 years of our marriage, he actually felt happy. It was just, he was too emotionally blind. I got into the car, smiled at him, and raised a hand in farewell, ready to roll the window up. Suddenly, he walked over and placed his hand against the rising glass, stopping it. "Emily," he called my name. I had been looking at my phone. When I looked up, still smiling from the message I'd just read, I saw him. The smile hadn't even faded from my lips, but something in his expression sent a sharp, sudden pain through my chest. A high-pitched whir buzzed in my ears, like the persistent chirping of cicadas on a summer afternoon. "Is there something else, Michael?" I looked at him calmly. He stood there in silence, quietly gazing at me. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then my phone chimed again. I glanced down, the corners of my lips curling into another soft smile. My fingers danced across the screen, replying to the message. Michael finally took a step back. "No, nothing. Safe travels. Let me know when you arrive." I nodded, waved again, then looked down and continued texting. I didn't look up at him again, not even once. The car started. It turned a corner and slowly drove out of his view. And so, time moved on, slowly, steadily, year after year. After Claire was released from prison, she begged to see me, over and over again. Michael went to her. He even asked others to plead on her behalf. But in the end, I never saw her. I heard she married a government official. Or maybe she didn't marry anyone at all. Eventually, she disappeared without a trace. When Michael turned 42, Mrs. Song passed away. I traveled across the country with my husband and our children to attend her funeral. That was the last time we saw each other in this lifetime. As we were preparing to leave, I stood in front of him. It looked like his eyes turned red, but he never said a word. He stood at the gates of the old estate, watching as our car drove away, frozen in place. Only when a flock of birds scattered overhead did he finally lower his head and glance down at the wedding ring on his finger. He smiled faintly, then turned and walked slowly back into the depth of the house. He retraced the path I had taken when I left. Step by step, he returned to the study. There, he opened the drawer and pulled out the fountain pen I had given him as a wedding gift. It had been years, but now he picked it up again and slowly wrote a single line. Looking back toward the depths of clouded memory, I regret only how fleeting it was. Another 4 years passed. One spring day, on the anniversary of the day we married, he didn't come down for breakfast as usual. The servants sensed something was wrong. They pried open the door to the study. There, they found him in the armchair by his desk, already gone. In front of him sat a photo. faded at the edges from years of handling. The person in the photo still wore a warm smile, but it was a smile from 20 years ago. On the desk, among a scattering of blank paper, were the words he had written with the gold pen, rushed and uneven. Looking back toward the depths of clouded memory, I regret only how fleeting it was. Just 3 fleeting years had left him trapped in place, while I had long since moved on.